It's setting up our meeting.
Okay.
Okay, we are now live on Facebook, is what I'm being told
Okay.
by Mark and all his friends. I want to
Okay.
welcome today Andrew Bishop, saxophone professor of jazz and improvisation. Is that right? At
Yep.
University of Michigan,
Hmm.
and a WCO alum. So really happy to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be
First,
here.
first question that I wanted to just sort of jump into is uh, why on earth did you pick this as your career as a musician? What led you to that pathway?
Gotcha. Well, I grew up in Wichita and went to Wichita North. Had a really great band director, Marla Weber, who recently retired from Goddard. And, just got to know a lot of the professors at Wichita State while I was in high school. People like Craig Owens, the guitar player, and Tom Fowler was a music ed professor there, but also directed the jazz ensembles. And so I started studying with him, and also several graduate students, and just kind of got the bug. Honestly, I my pathway through music has sort of been very very circuitous. I was always interested in jazz and improvisation. But I studied classical saxophone when I was at Wichita State and also at the University of Michigan, as well as composition, which is what I ended up doing most of my graduate degrees in. And then
Right.
sort of what happened was, it was just I was always still very active in kind of all of those fields, but ultimately, I think, in terms of at least my academic career path, that the job opened up at Michigan, and it was just kind of too good to pass up. And so I put myself in the best position to kind of land that position in jazz and contemporary improvisation. And yeah, so that's sort of how it kind of veered around in different ways. I worked for several years as a copyist, music copyist, doing finale input, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I'm also a woodwind doubler, so I did a lot of Broadway show kind of things. So yeah, it's been an interesting career, and I'm sort of at a interesting crossroads where I'm sort of trying to figure out what sort of the next 15 years holds.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I have plenty of time to think about that right now.
I know we're
So
uh, yeah, we got a lot of free time. So one question I've been asking people, but I'm going to ask you a different version. I've been asking people like if you could go back in time and grab young 18-year-old Andrew and say,
hmm
"Hey man, do this so
hmm
that you can be better now." I want to ask actually a variation on that, which is as someone who's dealing with sort of the new next generation of artists and music makers, what do you feel like has changed for them compared to when you were a student?
Oh wow, that is a really interesting question. I think one of the interesting things, I can only speak from my experience at Michigan, is that you know um, our school is very separated into specialized fields. Um,
Mm,
and I think it was kind of the antithesis of what I experienced as a professional musician, which was that I always had all of these sort of different things to plug into. And when I wasn't working as a saxophonist, I was doing arrangements, and when I wasn't doing arrangements, I was doing commissions and music for podcasts and those sorts of things. And I think that one of the interesting things that has sort of developed that I'm trying to continue to keep open for all of my students is that they certainly get good, and become the best artists that they can be in whatever area they're specializing in, like saxophone. But also to keep an open mind about all of the other possibilities
Mm.
that they could do. And that was something actually that Wichita State did really well for me. This could just be a complete perceptive sense of time too, that maybe this isn't reality, but when I was a student, I just felt like I had forever to figure this all out. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just the sort of the intensity of the internet and all of what it's sort of brought into the picture, that it just seems like there's less time to pull things together than there used to be. But I don't know if that's just a perception. I don't have an answer to that. So
That's really intriguing to me, because I think there is something to be said about that, that we have this sort of pressure to always be producing something. And that if somehow we're not, daily updating something, like that, somehow we're falling behind. Um, Whereas I think, when I was a student, for sure, it was, and, it sort of sounds akin to yours, which was, this idea of like, yeah, take some time, explore, and like work through these things, and not just like, oh, no, you better have this figured out. And
thank you. That's exactly what it was. That's, and, I just think, you see these, it's just really easy to get into this sort of thing where it's like you see all of these social media feeds, or, where it's like this person's doing this and this person's doing this and this person won this competition. And it just seems like there's a greater urgency. And I'm always trying to be aware of that, because I certainly don't want my students to not be ready for whatever is out there. But I really appreciated the time to take some risks and have a lot of failures, quite frankly, as a student. I wish I'd done more, actually.
yeah,
I say that all the time now to my, when students do composition lessons with me, it's just like, oh, I wish I'd been like in the practice room hallway every day, going down and saying, hey, can you play this on the violin for me? Show me how this works, like,
yeah.
and yeah. So anyway.
I mean, I think that's such a great point, that, there's this, I talk a lot about this with some of my students too, that it's like, if you treat, I teach composition. And so if you treat every work like it's got to be this precious gem that's perfect, you're never going to write anything. And so if you just treat each piece like just a giant experiment, and it could fail dramatically, and you will gain so much, gain as much as if it was a like wild success.
Indeed.
And I remember when I was working on my doctorate and I finally became ABD, I remember my advisor sort of taking me aside, and I was writing a concerto for orchestra, and he said, listen, the number one reason people don't finish doctorates in composition is they feel like their dissertation has to be their like magnum opus. And the reality is, this is the piece you're going to write when you're 24 years old, and it's probably going to suck. and, and when you're 40, you're never going to look back on it. And so if you just approach it that way.
I have two really hilarious stories on that front. One was when I first got here to Michigan, Leslie Bassett was still here. And of course, Leslie had done his DMA at Michigan. And I told him one day, I said, yeah, I ran across your dissertation the other day in the library. And he was like, oh. And then even deeper, a number of years later, we had George Crumb as a guest artist, who is also an alum. And somebody was talking about how they had run across his dissertation, and he was like, oh, like, I never want to see that ever again.
Yeah, I remember having a big crisis during my master's degree. I was writing a bunch of pieces, and they were all just garbage. And I called up my undergraduate composition teacher, who's remained a huge mentor of mine. And I called him and I was like, Marty, I think I made a mistake. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to be a composer. Like, like maybe like I got lucky with a couple of pieces, but he's like, no. He's like, do you know how many pieces you're gonna look back from this time period in your life and you're gonna say like, let's still play those pieces. Like you're just figuring
Yeah.
stuff out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think that's great advice to our students. Like at this
Yeah.
time in your life, you're just figuring things out and
And
don't
just
stress
and
out.
also from a performance standpoint, just like getting out and playing and just playing in front of your friends, even for a group of 5 people, and just like get feedback. And I'm really glad that I had like a lot of opportunity just to kind of, or I used to say yes to just everything that came my way, and
Yeah.
that those little skill sets that you start to build become these kind of life-saving, like I was playing like in this uh like Sunday church horn section in Wichita,
Yeah.
the name of the church, and none of the arrangements were transposed, so everything had to be site transposed. And for the first 3 weeks, I really slaughtered that gig. I mean, I didn't think I was going to keep it, and then by sort of a month in, all of a sudden I had this incredible skill set. And then lo and behold, years later, you're reading and somebody says, hey, like I have this gig, but everything's in concert. Can you transpose by site? I'm like, yeah, totally, that's
Yeah.
fine. And so
Yeah.
just anyway, um, yeah,
Yeah, I like that idea. You sort of, in a way, you fail your way to success, which is,
yeah,
part
I
of
love it.
part of
I
that
love it.
goal.
Yeah.
So I'm interested as a composer, as an improviser, and as an artist. One of the things that I discover the more and more I talk to other artists is that while those those that time of discovery, the applied lessons that you had, all that stuff is so vital to us as musicians. I'm also wondering sort of what other things, what other than your implied lessons really like impacted you as an artist.
Wow. Cool question. Um, well, for one thing, um, I mean, this might not be the exact direction. I can sort of bring it back more towards the middle, but when I was at Wichita State, I was a pretty terrible writer in terms of prose.
Yeah.
And I had an amazing English teacher at Wichita State, Janine Hathaway. I don't know if she's still there or not,
I
but
don't know.
I mean, just she essentially, was sort of like wave one and just teaching me how to like really put my ideas and get my ideas down on prose. And that has had a huge impact on me, definitely as an artist and kind of
Mm,
scholar, the ability to just be able to express your ideas. So that was something that was sort of indirectly something maybe um, a little more direct in terms of just some approaches to artistry is um, you know just engaging in as learning as much from artists from different disciplines, I think has been really vital for me. And I don't get as much of an opportunity to do that as I was at a small liberal arts school for many years, and I was really good friends with all the art teachers there, and that was really wonderful. I spent some time at the MacDowell Colony, which was is
mm,
the an artist colony that was founded by the composer Edwin MacDowell in New Hampshire. And just being around visual artists and playwrights and kind of listening to what they struggle with, that would be the other big thing for me. Wichita State definitely provided that a little. I took a really mind-blowing art history class there. I remember in the 90s, one of my favorite classes of all time. I still have my notes actually from that class. So um,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that would be the other thing. I suppose. I occasionally teach in a class. We have a program here at Michigan called Living Arts, which is kind of an
Mm.
interdisciplinary kind of think tank. And I was in there with some architects, for a number, and that was just really fascinating to kind of hear how similar the struggles are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I teach a general education sort of interdisciplinary arts course that I teach with the head of dance and a member of the art faculty, and it's so great because all three of us are in the room the whole time, but exactly, it's sort of like you go, oh, like, yeah, okay, I guess that, or you think like, I was watching the dance professor is a specialist in mime, and
Hmm.
so he's like going through these gestures, and I'm thinking like this, and he's talking about how he conceives a work through this gesture, and I was like, that's not so different than the way I think about a piece of music.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
uh,
it's really inspiring just to sort of see how sort of art and idea kind of come together,
yeah,
in somewhat different ways, but also in similar ways. And
yeah. I just want to take this moment to give a big plug for our WSU music, or actually all the students at Wichita State who might be watching this, is that part of you being a student is you get free tickets to every event on campus that's fine arts related. So, there's no reason you can't go see, plays and theater and visual art. And, I think that's an important part. I think an important part of growing as an artist is growing outside of your art and letting those worlds kind of collide together.
I used to live in the apartment over there near Kirby's, and
Oh,
so every day I would walk by that Moreau, and
yeah.
it's still like etched in my brain, in the best possible way. And
Yeah.
I always like to, here's as a funny piece of Wichita State history. My wife is also a Wichita State alum. She graduated in the Bachelor of Music Education,
Mm.
and our first date was Mozart's Così fan tutte with Joyce DiDonato, who was then Joyce Flaherty,
Right.
in the lead role. So kind of a fun moment, and we she was here last year, and we had a great time getting to kind of
Oh,
reconnect with her. So yeah. Anyway,
that's awesome.
so funny.
You know, one of the things that I'm discovering, I've been at WSU now for 9 years. This will end my ninth academic year this year. And when I came here, I kind of like, I had talked to a colleague of mine about Wichita State before I'd come, and because he was from Kansas, like, oh, that's a great music school. Like, you're going to love it there. And the longer I've been here, it's like the depth of our alumni. I mean, it's incredible.
It's pretty unbelievable, and it just and people that I didn't even know, who I'll find out later, I was like, oh my gosh, like you were with this, I can't believe it. So it's really, yeah, it's really quite extraordinary. So
You're part of a very cool and elite club, I must say.
yeah.
um, I'm wondering, sort of just fun stories, like when you think about your time at Wichita State, were there any sort of moments that you can recall that were like, oh man, this, I don't want to say like sealed the deal. Well, let me rephrase this. So I know when I was a college student, I had these like moments in my musical life where like this totally convinced me that I made the right choice, or I had some experiences like I don't know like when I'll ever have something like this again. And I'm wondering, when you think about your time at Wichita specifically, if there were some moments like that with maybe a guest artist or even with one of your teachers.
For sure. I can conjure up a number of them, and so I'll try to highlight three of them, because
Yeah.
I'm sure I could come up with many. The first one is, I remember after my theory class with Dr. Walter Mays, um, I had been trying to get the courage to ask him if I could take some composition lessons with him.
Mm.
And I had been kind of composing in a jazz sort of vein for many years. But I really wanted to get into, writing music for chamber music and larger ensembles. And I'd had such a great experience in his theory class. And so at the time I was a music education major, and he ended up talking my ear off for 45 minutes, and which was amazing. I can still remember most of that conversation, which of course made me 20 minutes late for my Psychology 101 class, which I did go to, and then dropped that hour and switched my major over to performance, and then ultimately also composition. So that was a big moment for me.
Yeah.
And I always joke that I now some of my greatest friends and colleagues are music ed people. And it's just, and of course my wife is in music education. And so I certainly, to a certain extent, regret not finishing that degree, but it was definitely a pivotal moment of sort of choice. There was also, I remember one time, does the New Music Festival happen there? Yeah.
Yeah, it takes different paths every year now, but yeah, we still have some version of it.
Gotcha. I remember at the time my saxophone teacher was Gene Lansing, and who was an amazing teacher, just phenomenal. Really set me up beautifully. Anyway, she at the last minute decided not to do this piece by the guest composer, Marilyn Shrewd. And she asked if I would do it. And I was this kind of goes back to an earlier conversation. I was absolutely positive there was no way I could learn this piece in the 2 weeks that I had to learn it. And somehow I did it. And that was also a really pivotal moment in just going, like sometimes if you just, you don't think you can do it. I will tell you, I still live in fear of that moment where I'm going to get a bunch of music sent to me, where I'm going to go, okay, this is where they find out I have no idea what I'm doing. And fortunately that still has not happened. But that was truly a moment for me to realize that, even with this really, really challenging piece, that I had the training to have pulled together something that was really challenging. And so, yeah, that was definitely a real moment for me. A couple of different moments. One where I completely changed paths and was no longer going to be a band director in the Wichita area, and just decided to take the kind of the more creative journey. And the other one was just a kind of oh wow, yeah, what I have learned here is incredibly valuable, and I can do this. So
yeah. I think too, the first story, I think the part of it that I think is so important is this idea of, actually both of them have to do with taking risks, right? And stepping outside. And like, ultimately, I think something that I think more and more about is what separates like a great artist from a good artist. What's the difference between Yo-Yo Ma and, some other equally just technically proficient cellist? And for me, I think the two things that sort of jump out are, one is their attention to detail. That level of detail that's so deep is kind of impressive to me. But second to that is just the willingness to just take a complete risk and just go, I don't know, this could be something that, doesn't work out, but I'll try it.
No, that definitely was something. I'll also share. I was just thinking when you contacted me, I was just thinking of this story, which I had forgotten about. When I arrived as a master's student at Michigan, I had 3 other colleagues who were all composition majors. It was definitely a very intimidating time, because all of a sudden it was just like everybody was at a really high level. But one of the really interesting things that I learned really quickly was, One of them had done his undergrad at Harvard. The other one had done his undergraduate at New England Conservatory. And the other one had done his undergraduate at Louisville. And both my friend from Louisville and also me, we always felt like somehow we were inferior. And then at a certain point, in the second semester, I remember we both were having coffee and we said, you know what? I feel just as prepared for this moment as these people who went to these elite schools. And I think it was really truly a moment of there's just amazing teachers to take advantage of. And that was another true moment for me of just about the kind of the magic of what, sort of Wichita State sort of set the foundation for. So
that's a great point. And it's something I stress with our students a lot, is that the quality of your education really has nothing to do with the name of your university. Right. You've got students who are at University of Michigan who I would bet probably a small handful of them who are not getting a University of Michigan education because they're not applying themselves in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then similar to, we've got students who are getting a Juilliard level education because a lot of this is on the student and what they're willing to do and try. So
yeah, no, it's a great lesson. And so I'm really I just have to point out here on May the 4th, I'm using my Boba Fett mug. So,
all my Star Wars stuff is in my office right now. I'm disappointed. Well, we only have just one more minute. So the last question that I've been asking everybody, because I think it's the most important one for those of us who are self-isolated, is what are you doing for dinner tonight?
It's been interesting. Like I've done some things that I never would have done before, like make pita bread, or make your own pizza crust and those sorts of things. I haven't gotten that far. I did a slow cooker thing yesterday. I'm not a vegetarian, but I really love like really good homemade veggie burgers. And so we have some sweet potatoes and we have some garbanzo beans. I might figure out something to do with those.
Excellent. I just know that, so many of us are stuck at home trying to find new recipes. So, I like to just ask, hey, so what do you eat? And then they go, okay, I'll figure something. That sounds good. I haven't had.
One of the great things about the internet now is, it's like you're like, okay, I have broccoli and raisins and some olive oil and salt. What can I do with that?
What can I make with this? Well, excellent. Well, Andrew, I just want to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And, is there anything we need to plug for you? Do you have any albums out or?
Nah.
All right.
But I appreciate that. So
go Google Andrew Bishop and, support him in whatever way you feel necessary. So thanks so much for your time, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This was fun.